Hello everyone, my name is Prashant Gunjal and I'm working as a MuleSoft architect. So welcome back to the second session of this Anypoint Code Builder series where I will explain you how to design an API in Visual Studio Code. We already had our first session where I've explained you what all softwares we need and how to do the configurations of all those softwares before starting with Anypoint Code Builder. So if you have not gone through that session, I'll request to have that session first and then you can check out this second session. So as soon as the plugins, the Anypoint extension plugin is installed in Visual Studio Code, you'll see a similar window and just click on the design an API. So once you click it, it will ask you for some project name. It will provide you the location where this artifacts will be stored. And it will also ask you which specification language you want to create this specification for, right? So if you check the drop downs, we have multiple specification language. Mainly it is OS and RAML. For me, it's RAML for today. So I'll just leave it as it is, the default one. And along with the API specification, you'll also see one more option, which is API fragments. So the main difference between API specification and API fragments are API specifications are actually your specification file where all your endpoints, all your methods, all your query parameters, all your authentications, all your request and response types are mentioned. So it will be your main specification file, and API fragments are basically the reusable modular components that allows the developer to create the part of an API that can be shared and reused across multiple projects. So in short, API fragments are the common fragments which all the APIs requires. For example, API might need the authentication. API there might be multiple APIs which will need the similar request, right? So the common things we can club it together and we call that as an API fragment. And the specification we club it and we call that as an API specification. So in this session, I'm going to create one API specification, and we will also publish that specification to Anypoint Exchange. Along with that, we will also create one API fragment, and we'll also publish that API fragments to Anypoint Exchange. So let's get started with the API specification creation first. So before creation, let's try to understand the use case which we are going to follow for this session. So the use case are, we will create a simple RAML file with two endpoints. So one for adding the student entry to the database and another for fetching the student details from the database. Okay, so while fetching, we will provide the ID as a URI parameter in the endpoint, and based on the ID, it will request the respective database and fetch out the details for you. Okay. So let's try to create the API specification first for this, and this specification file will need the authentication. So we will have the basic authentication. So basic authentication is now a common fragment. Okay, so that can be same for multiple APIs. So we will club that basic authentication in the API fragment, and we will deploy that as an API fragment in Anypoint Exchange. Okay, so let's get started with the API specification. So I'll name it something like students API, and the series name is part 2. Okay, I'll leave it the RAML as it is. Once I create the project, it will open a window in a separate tab, and you'll see there are two files. The first one is the Exchange file, where you'll have all the configurations of your Anypoint Exchange. So while deploying, it will know where to deploy that artifact. And along with that, you'll also have a separate RAML file where you'll actually have this will be your specification file, and here we are going to create our own RAML file with two endpoints. Now I already have that RAML file ready with me. I'll just copy that RAML file and I'll paste it here. And let me explain what this RAML file is all about. So this is a RAML 1.0 version, which has a title as a student API, which has the initial version as a v1, and this is the base URI for this RAML file. So this RAML file has two endpoints. Okay, the first endpoint is basically to publish, or you would say to store the student information in database. So it will have a, as we are passing the payload, it will be a method as a post, and the description is add a student's information. It will accept the body as an application JSON, and the format for the application JSON will be of this type. So the JSON format will be of student type, and student type is basically an object which will have four properties: the name of string, the ID of string, result of string, and the country of string. So the name of a person or the name of a student we want to store, the ID of a student which we want to store, the result. So in this use case, I'm assuming that these students, we are basically storing the information of the past and fail students. So in this case, the result will be either pass or either fail. Okay, and the country from which the student belongs, that also we can store it here. Now these data types are basically, it's a common for now. I've made it common, but based on your requirement, the ID will be of, this might be of, number or integer or anything like that. Okay, so on a real ground level, this might be a little different. Okay, and the response of the student type will be of 201 as we are creating it. So this will be the HTTP code for that, and it will just share you the response in this simple format. That is, it will have a key and it will have one value, that is student successfully added. Okay, and let me show you the payload, how it will look like. So yeah, this will be a payload. Okay, it will be of JSON and key value here, ID, name, result, and country. Okay, this is one endpoint. Along with that, what all students we have added, if you want to get the information of that respective student based on the ID, we are creating one more endpoint for the same. So ID we are passing as an URI parameter here. Okay, and this will be the description, that is, this is the student ID. It is of type string and it is required. If we are calling this endpoint, we need to pass this ID compulsory. Okay, so we'll have the method as a get. This will be the description, and once we get the information, we will have a response in this particular format. So as this is a get method, we have a HTTP code as 200, and body will be of application JSON, and in example, this will be the response. That is, whatever we stored, we will receive the same response. Okay, and if we don't find any student with that particular ID, it will provide us the details in a 404 that is not found, and it will provide the details in this format. Okay, so this is a student RAML file we have created, and we gonna test it first. That is, we do a mock test, and once we do a mock test in Anypoint Visual Studio Code, then we will publish this RAML to Anypoint Exchange. To test this RAML file as an mocking service, we can see this option on the top right corner, which says API console. Click that API console, and you should see all the endpoints getting populated here. So let's try it with the first endpoint, that is adding the student details in the database. So as soon as you do it, select the mocking service, make it as a try, and just send it. So as soon as you send it, it should see you should see the message that is student successfully added. So let me provide the proper details. Okay, send. Okay, so as soon as we send it, we should see a message like this. Similarly, let's check out for the next endpoint, which is fetching the details based on the ID as a URI parameter. So here, let me try to have ID as a 1, and once you send it, you'll see a response in this similar format. So at this point, this is a hard-coded response, but when we are working on any project, it will be an actual response coming from the database. But that we cannot test here because this is a mocking service. This is just to check if your RAML file is working properly. And based on that, we can then share these details with the end users or backend team. So once you do the mocking service, once the mocking service is successfully completed, then there are multiple options here on the top right, but we will go inside each of these options when there is actually a need of it, because that way only we will be able to understand what this option is all about and what purpose it is solving. Okay, so for now we'll just use API console as one of the option, and as soon as the mocking service is done, let's try to deploy this RAML file on the Anypoint Exchange. Now for deploying, you need to first connect Anypoint Visual Studio Code within your Anypoint code builder. And for that, the first thing is we need to have these credentials handy. That is your Anypoint Platform, client ID and client secret. So this is basically respect to the business group. Okay, and you should also find out the business group ID for your specific particular business group. Now, if you don't know, you need to log into this Anypoint Platform like this, and then go to the access management, go to the business group, select your business group, and then you should see the business group ID populating here. Client ID is here and client secret is here. Okay, just get all the details, keep that handy somewhere, and as soon as you have it, you need to go to the bottom right corner, and here, as I have already connected this Visual Studio with Anypoint Platform, I'm able to see the username of my Anypoint Platform. But for you, if you are doing it for the first time, you should see some message like logged into the Anypoint Platform. Just click that, and it will, now for me it's logout, but for you it will be seen, you should see a message like login to Anypoint Platform. And once you click it, then it will ask you for the username and password. Provide the username and password, and that's all. Your your Visual Studio will be connected with your Anypoint Platform. Now, as our Visual Studio is connected with Anypoint Platform, now we need to inform Visual Studio that where this RAML file we actually need to publish. Okay, like under which business group we need to publish this. Now for that, you need to go to the Exchange file, which is auto created, and here you need to provide the group ID of your business group. Now for me, this is the business group ID. I'll copy, paste it here, and that's all. So we are done with by linking our Visual Studio with platform, and also to let Visual Studio know that where to publish it. Now we need to fire some command, and this operation will then be continued. Okay. Now for that, go to View Command Palette and type MuleSoft. So you'll see all the commands populating here in this Visual Studio Code, and we need to select the respective command for our use case. Now for our use case, the command which is noted is MuleSoft publish API specification to Exchange. Now once you click it, it will ask you for which business group you need to deploy. Select that business group. After that, it will ask what will be the name of this project. Then if you want to rename this name, rename it right away here, or else you click it. Then it will ask you for the artifact ID. If you want, keep it. The version, asset ID, the API version, and that's it. So as soon as you do all these 4 steps, it will start the publishing your API specification to Anypoint Exchange. Now if you want to see the logs behind this, you need to go to the would you like to implement? So this has now been published to Anypoint Exchange. Now it is asking if you want to implement it right away, or if you don't want to implement it and you have a plan to implement it afterwards. So for me, I have a plan to implement it afterwards, so I'll make it as no. Okay, and you should see one message. we already saw that message that it is deployed successfully, published successfully. Now let me go to the Anypoint Exchange and let me verify if it is already published in Anypoint Exchange or not. Now if you go to Anypoint Exchange and select our business group, we should see that this student API RAML file is now successfully published, and this is with the same name. Now if you want to rename any name, we can rename it to any part here in this Anypoint Exchange. So let me rename it to student API specification. Okay, and this is something we have created as a template. We can also provide some DI descriptions to make it more user friendly, and whoever want to check this, they can go to this and they will be able to understand what this specification is all about, and that's all. Okay, so in this first part we have checked how to deploy our how to publish our API specification to Anypoint Exchange. Now let us go ahead and check the other option, that is publishing the API fragments. Okay, now for the same use case, we are trying to create one basic authentication fragment, and that we will use in this API, and that we are treating it as a common fragment, and we'll publish that API fragment to Anypoint Exchange. Now let me give it a name as basic authentication fragment. Okay, I'll keep it as RAML 1.0, and here we have fragment types. So based on the need, we can select what type of fragment we are trying to create. So if you are trying to create a similar similar kind of template for your method for each endpoints, like method, what will be your request type, what will be your response types, and what will be the query parameter. If these kind of intermediate things are common, based on that you can either select the traits or resource types, or if you want to create a common library which will have a lot of things in place, then you can create a library. If there is a common data type, you can create a data type, or if it has a similar documentation, you can select that user documentation. If it is of type example, that is if request type example is same or response type example is same, in that case you can create an example. You can also create a annotation type, and for us, as we are creating a security schema, as we are creating a basic authentication schema, it is basically of a type as a security scheme. I'll select the security scheme and I'll create the project. As soon as you do it, you'll see a similar structure here as well. You'll see one RAML file of type security scheme, and along with that you'll also see an exchange file. Now let's add the details in the RAML file. Now similar to API specification, we have a API fragments as well ready. I'll copy it, I'll paste it, and this is basically the API fragment. And here what are we accepting, or what are we trying to do is we are creating a fragment where it will have a authorization as a header parameter, and in this authorization we are accepting some sort of authentication token. Okay, and this will be of type basic. Okay, and few more description. So it's a simple API fragment of security scheme, and as soon as you have it, let's try to publish this. Now for publishing, you can either you can follow the same approach which we followed, that is go to view command palette and type and search for the MuleSoft command, and then select this API specification to exchange. Or either you have another option to go ahead with the terminal, and in this terminal you can basically provide the MuleSoft command manually. Okay, so there are two options. So for me, let's go ahead with the command palette, which is easy for us, and select this publish API specification to exchange. As soon as you do it, the business group, it will ask then the fragment name, the artifact ID, the asset ID, API version ID, and everything. And as soon as I select all of them, or I update all of them, it will start publishing the API fragment to Anypoint Exchange. And you can also see the the commands here. Okay, you can go to this output or debug console, and select your appropriate server. Now we can see that this fragment has been successfully published. Now let us go to the Anypoint Exchange and verify if it's already published or not. Now you see there are two files here. The first one is a specification file and the second one is basic authentication fragment. And you should see that this is being published successfully within few seconds, before few seconds. Okay, so that's all for today's session. So in today's session we have checked how to create the API specification and how to create the API fragment, how to do a mocking service of API specification, and at last we saw that how to deploy or how to publish this API specification from your Anypoint from your Visual Studio Code to your Anypoint Exchange. So that's all for today's session. But in the next session, we are going to check that how to implement the same API, whatever we have published. So that's all. And thank you. Thank you for watching.